Well, it's Brexit Day finally on Friday. The world will be watching eagerly to see how Britain, as well as the EU, fare economically as they respond to the challenges facing trade and plenty of other issues. Joining me now for our economics panel, our experts on this and more, Adam Crichton, economics editor at The Australian. He's in Sydney, and Terry McCrann, business columnist with The Australian and the Herald Sun, live from Melbourne. Now, Adam, you were over there on the lovely little island of Britain not so long ago. Will they be celebrating or crying in their beers, do you reckon?
Well, certainly I think most people were celebrating that finally they don't have to talk about Brexit so much. It had completely dominated the press, of course, for more than 3 years. So I think it was a rejoicing, I think, certainly for all those people that voted for the Conservatives. And as we know, that was the overwhelming majority.
Terry, I reckon Britain's going to get its mojo back. I mean, here was a country, really, that had conquered the world in many respects for 800 and 900 years, and then suddenly it sidled itself up to Europe and went backwards at a rate of knots. So I'm in the positive camp. Where do you sit?
Absolutely, Peter. I think that we're going to get a replay of the Y2K bug. Remember the Y2K bug? The world was going to come to an end.
You're too young, Adam. You're too young.
Everybody was forecasting that the world would come to an end with Brexit, or at least for the Brits. I think we're going to see Friday the come and go, and no disaster. And for the longer term, I agree absolutely, because I think Europe is frankly an economic carcass sustained only by the game that Germany is playing with the undervalued euro, and really dominating. And the removal of Britain is going to seriously weaken Europe. And I think that the loser out of this is going to be Europe, and Britain is going to be able to prosper once again as an independent player in the global economy.
That's a really good point, Terry. In all of this debate, certainly in recent time, we're focused on what will be the effect on Britain come Friday. But Adam, where do you think this will play out for Europe now? And of course, a lot of pressure on Germany in all of this.
Well, certainly Europe will be hoping that it turns out very badly for Britain. I mean, I don't think it will, but for them it's going to be a disaster if it does turn out well for Britain, because there'll be pressure in Spain and Italy and Greece to leave the EU once again. And I think if another country of even medium size left, it would see the EU, I think, fairly quickly start to unravel. So I think this is a much more anxious time for the EU than it is for Britain, because of course, the UK was the second largest economy in the EU, and I think is roughly equivalent to about 15 or 16 of the smaller countries all leaving at once. So it really is a major event for the EU. So look, I mean, it's certainly not good news for them.
I don't think we can say that economies, China and Australia, have yet got itself coronavirus, but there's a few sniffly noses in there, Terry. A bit of worry about how this might impact on trade and tourism.
Well, I think we can worry a little less now than a week ago, because clearly, who can really predict what's going to be the outcome and how dramatically the virus might spread. But clearly, a week in, it's not quite as disastrous as we might have anticipated. And the way the Chinese government have moved pretty ruthlessly, pretty brutally, to isolate 50 to 70 million people, I think that I would think that we might look back on this in a few months' time as something that was tending to head towards disaster, but hasn't been, and therefore the impact both on China and Australia, and indeed the global economy, won't be that disastrous. It'll be a blip, not something that fundamentally destabilises the economy.
And look, to be fair, that's where we were with all the preparedness around avian flu a few years ago. Certainly, we stockpiled all that Tamiflu. It didn't turn out as bad as we thought, but somewhere along the line, you look at the history of pandemics. I just had an Oxford professor on a moment ago, Adam. One of them will hit hard, and that's a matter of historical fact that something will come our way. I've got to say, you love to talk about the inefficiency of government. I watched with interest a couple of videos online about how quickly they are building these new hospitals, literally in 4 or 5 days in China. I wish some of that would infect our economy, not just all the bad stuff.
No, look, that is certainly true. I mean, it's I suppose one of the advantages of a dictatorship that, when there is a lethal disease like this, the government can be very ruthless. It can move very quickly. It can also build infrastructure extremely quickly. I mean, it's not just hospitals, of course. I mean, we keep in this country, sorry to change the topic, but whenever the topic of nuclear energy comes up, everyone says, oh, it takes too long. But the Chinese government seems to build these reactors in about 1.5 years, and they're basically state-of-the-art reactors. So certainly the Chinese government can move very quickly. Just briefly on the disease, I just wanted to follow on from Terry's point, just to point out that certainly the death rate is far, far lower from this disease. It seems that even though 132 or so people have died, it's about 2.2%, I just calculated earlier, of the total number of people infected, whereas SARS back in 2003 was over 10%. So the disease itself, I think, is less lethal, but just to be less optimistic on the economy, back in 2003, Australia was so much less dependent on China than we are now. So if there is any shock to the Chinese economy, it's certainly going to be a lot worse for us now. I mean, just to give you one figure, I mean, back in 2002, only 5% of our exports went to China, and now it's over 30%.
Absolutely right. Now, you said a nuclear word. I could see Terry levitating there, had a column there to say, now we're having this whole conversation about bushfires, and we have a constant conversation about energy. We've got to have a conversation about nuclear. Now, you said, we don't build them here because too many of the critics say it takes too long. They also say it costs too much. Now, I've never known anyone in policy terms who doesn't do something in Australia because it costs too much. Look at the submarines, look at the NBN. When are we going to wake up, Terry?
Well, absolutely, Peter. Now, let me be very clear. I would like us to embark on a new series of modern, high-efficiency coal-fired power stations. We have the coal. It's the cheapest way to generate baseload power. But given the hysteria that's been unleashed over the last month, the practical politics are not going to get us a coal-fired power station any time in our livable future. So if we want baseload power, we have to go nuclear. And as Adam said, there is no reason in the world why we couldn't build nuclear power stations inside, let's be realistic about Australia, say 3 to 5 years. And that, to me, is fundamental. And all the arguments against nuclear, it takes too long, it's too expensive, all of those are driven by all that green tape, that red tape, all the processes which build in huge capital costs totally unnecessarily. So that if we actually want to be serious about having a future where we have baseload power, but we don't want to be emitting more carbon dioxide, there is only one option, and that's nuclear.
All right, got to leave it there. I know the RBA's got its first meeting next Tuesday, so Wednesday night. I'll get your analysis on what happened and should it have happened and should it not have happened. Gentlemen, thanks very much for your time.